Welcome! In this series of short videos, we will look at topics for the PowerBasic Windows Compiler. Today we will look at the Windows Form Designer to add a grid to our form. This was our application at the end of the last video. We have a fairly simple dialog showing on screen. The user can key in a number of details, pick from lists, select a date, and hit the Submit button. When the Submit button is clicked, it validates the data on the form to ensure the user has filled in all the mandatory fields, and then displays a progress bar to simulate some back-end processing. Once this is complete, the progress bar dialog terminates. What we're going to do today is we're going to populate the center of this dialog by putting in a very simple grid control by using a list view. So let's go and have a look at the code. To achieve this, we need to go into the Forms Designer. In the Tools menu, select PowerBasic Forms. As we have two forms in this particular application, it will bring up the most recently designed form. The toolbar gives you a selection where you can pick which dialog you wish to edit, and we're going to be editing the title dialog. If we have a look at our controls, we'll see there is a button for a list view control. If we double click on that, a list view will appear on the screen and we can position it to where we want it to be. So we'll set it about this size, and it's showing some dummy data to give you an idea of the grid look that this list view will actually display. If we click on the test dialog, it will show us how the dialog will actually look with the list control in place and some simulated data. So if we double click on the control, we'll get up the list view properties. I'm going to change the name of this, and we'll call it List View Staff Data Grid. And we will set client edge to put an edge around the list control, and we will remove the tab stop, as in this case I want the list view to be entirely read-only from the user's point of view, and let's OK that. Now if we save our updated dialog, and once that has saved, we'll go back to our code. And if we scroll down slightly, we will see that on the list of constants, we now have our new constant for the control we have just added. And if we have a look at the function in which all the controls are drawn, we will see at the bottom we should have a new entry for the staff data grid. So if we run our application now, we will see on screen our list control. There are no details showing at all for this control because we'll need to put some code in to define the columns and the data which is going to appear in each of the cells. And we also don't have a title, so let's go back into our form designer and add the title. And we'll clone this from one of the existing ones. Control-C, Control-V, and there is our new title with the same properties. So we will give a name to this title. We'll call it Current Staff, and we'll put a caption in saying Current Staff. So if we save that once more back to the source code and reload it, we'll see we now have a new label and the color set in the code within the PB Forms dialog section. So now that we've achieved that, as you'll remember from the previous video, we've got a new font set up to change the size of the font for all the text on our dialog. So if we select the name of our dialog, the handle, and we go into the initialization of our callback function, and we'll need to add this new constant onto the list, which are changing fonts. So if we run the application now, we should have a title saying Current Staff, which is the same size and font as all the other labels. So how do we go about setting up some columns in this list view control? Well, let's go back to the code and we'll go into the function where everything is defined. So in our section of the code, we're going to put some of our own code in here. So the first thing we want to do is to set the style of our grid control. And we can do that by using the ListView set style command. This one is the extended version, and as always, it takes a number of parameters. The obvious ones are the dialog handle and the handle for the list view itself. And we're setting two constants up, grid lines and full row select. This will allow the lines between cells to be visible on the grid control. Having done that, we want to insert a number of columns. So we're going to use the ListView insert column command. And to make this a little tidier, I'm going to use the prefix command, because we're going to use this part of the code for each of the next 3 lines. So we're defining the handle of the dialog, the handle of the control, and we want 3 columns, columns 1, 2, and 3. Our first column we want to be titled name. The second, department, and the final one, start date. The next value in here is the width of the column. As our dialog has been defined in dialog units, we're using 50. We can change these numbers later if we find they're not appropriate. The final value is a value which defines whether the text in that column is left, right, or center justified. This is normally defined just by a number, but I'm going to use an enumeration in here to make the code a little more readable, as in LV center or center justified. So if we go back to the beginning of our code, and we create the new enumeration. We can set this up by using the enum command. This shows you the value to appear before the dot, and this the value after. So we're setting left to be 0, right would be the next number up, which is 1, and center would be 2. Techniques like this allow your code to be self-documenting, where a number on its own would not mean a great deal. So if we go back to our code, we have now set up 3 columns, the name, the department, and the start date. If we run the application now, we will see we now have columns showing in our list view. So it's starting to look more like a grid. We have the name, department, and start date. What I want the application to do is once the user has actually filled in all the details and pressed the submit button, what it does at the moment is that it displays dialog on screen with a progress bar. Once this is completed, which is of course simulating something happening in the background, I want the data to be fed into this list control so that the user can see what they've actually added. This allows the user to put several entries in and build up a list of current staff. So let's now go and look in the event handler, the callback function, where the submit button is actually clicked. If we scroll down, we will see here is the event that handles the clicking of the submit button. So once the processing dialog is actually terminated, we'll want to get the user data that's currently on the form. So we're going to use a control get text command twice. Once on the text name and once on the department. Next, we're going to look at how we put this information into the list view. When this dialog initially loads, there'll be no data in the list view except the titles. So we're going to need a value held in a variable to tell us which row we are writing to. So we're going to call that variable row. We'll declare this at the beginning of our function in a moment, but our first task here is to increment the value. So when the form initially loads, the value will be 0, and we'll increment it to give it a value of 1. Now we need to insert a brand new row to our list view. This can be done quite easily by using the ListView insert item command. It of course will take a number of parameters. This command inserts a brand new row on the list view. And we're defining the handle of the dialog, the handle of the list view, and 3 additional variables. The first being the row we're talking about. The next value will be 0, and the final value in this case is the name, the value we want to put in to the first column. So let's go up and declare this row variable. And here is our row variable. We're declaring this as a static variable, so that will hold its value between calls to this function. So the first time we call it, it will initially be 0. Then we will increment, populate the row, and the next time the user presses the submit button, it will increment the value once more, and it will hold the value of 2. We've also declared a local variable to hold the name of the staff member that we pull off the form. So we run the application now, and we will attempt to fill some details in. And once the submit button is pressed, our dialog appears. At the moment, there's nothing in the list view, but once this dialog completes, it will populate the person's name in the first column. So all we have to do now is to populate the next 2 columns. We can, of course, add extra columns, which would give us a scroll bar. But for the moment, we're just going to add 2, the department and the start date. Next, we will populate the department. As we've already added a new row to the list view with insert item, we can just set the text in the existing row. Again, passing the handle of the dialog, the handle of the control, and the row number we're dealing with. The next column is the column number. In this case, we're accessing column number 2, the second column in our list view, and we're populating it with the value held in the department variable. And to complete the third column, we're using the setText command once more to populate column number 3 with the start date. So if we run the application now, and put some details in, and hit the submit button, we will see that once that completes, it should populate all 3 columns, which it has indeed. The name, the department, and the date we have put in here. This is ideal for keeping track of the staff the user has entered. Once the user has entered the details of a member of staff, it would be ideal if we blanked out all the fields to allow the user to then go ahead and submit a second member of staff, which could then be added to the grid. So we're going to create a new function whose job it will be to clear all the fields on the form with the exception of the list view, and to reset the start date back to today. So we're going to create a new function called clear entries to handle the cleaning out of the entries on our form, and we're passing it the handle of the dialog. So here is the skeleton of our new function clear entries, taking its single parameter, the handle of the dialog. So we can use the control set text command to clean out the value on most of our fields. So I'm using the prefix command here to save a little bit of typing, as each of these 4 lines of code has control set text and the handle of the dialog as the first part of the command. Then all we need are the names of each of the controls. This will blank out all the text controls and also the label control on the right hand side, which is giving feedback to the user. Next, we need to unselect both the combo dropdown and the list box controls, which are holding the details for the department and for their working pattern. So we can do this quite easily by using 2 unselect commands, one for the combo box and one for the list view. This will leave the data in both of these controls, but it will change the state of the control to unselected. Finally, we want to restart the start date to today's date. This one is a little more complex. I'm going to create a new function to set a date on a control. This you will find very useful if you need to set dates on date controls programmatically. So first of all, we're declaring a local variable called date. I'm populating that with the reserve word date dollar in PowerBasic. Date dollar returns the date in a month, day, year format, which, as you know, is the American date format. And we're passing this date variable to our new function, along with the handle of the dialog and the handle of the control which you wish to set the date on. So here is the skeleton of our new setADate function, taking its parameters. So first we will set up 2 local variables. The first, dt, is a system time user-defined type, and the second calendar we're using as a handle. First of all, we will use the control handle command to capture the Windows handle of our date control. This will use the handles for the dialog and the date control and turn it into a Windows handle. We are then populating details within our system time user-defined type, being the month, the day, and the year by chopping up the date that's been passed in on our parameters. Now with all this information in place, we can now set the date time. Again, this is using a Windows API call called datetime set system time. It takes 3 parameters. The Windows handle we have populated just a moment ago, a GDT validate to make sure our value is correct, and DT, which is the user-defined type containing our date information. If this returns true, we have successfully set the date. If it returns false, then the date is either invalid or cannot for some reason be set. So let's try running the application once more to see if it works. The application is not compiling because I've missed something. Our list view unselect is a multi-select value. We need to do something a little different here. If we change this to list box, I think we can get away with it. Right, okay. So if we attempt to put some information in, we pick a department and we will select 2 values in the working pattern and we will set the date. If we hit the submit button, it will process, and once the processing is completed, it should unselect our list box, our comma box, blank out all the fields, reset the date back to today's date, and put the details into our list view grid. So let's put a second value in, and we'll pick 2 working patterns, and we'll do a different date for this one, and once more hit submit. And it should blank all the details out and put the information into the list box. So in summary, what we've achieved today is we have added a very basic grid to our dialog using a list view. We've additionally, once the submit button has been clicked, added on the facility to populate some details into this list view grid, and also blank out the details on the rest of the form to allow the user to add another member of staff. Hopefully you'll find these techniques useful in your own applications, but that's it for today. Thank you for watching.
Thank you for watching today's video. Please feel free to click on the link in the description below to discover more videos.